It's 7 p.m. and it's Tuesday night. I got my laptop on and I feel alright. I got a few joints rolled and my munchies made. Got my headphones on and I close the door, don't disturb me. It's time to stand up tall and say some things about the shitty world we're living in. With the boys at Raconteurs News. Sur Raconteurs, Raconteurs, sur Raconteurs, Raconteurs, sur Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News. Oh yeah.
Good evening, welcome to Raconteurs News, Tuesday the 12th of February 2019, sorry, I keep doing that, I'm a stupid idiot, I'm a fart and everything, but you know, you've got to understand, I'm going to be doing this, I do I have a little bit of dementia, I think, that's starting already, even at my younger age. Anyway, good evening. I hope you've had a good day, and we find you well, and we find you listening, and we find you okay. Listen, I've had a bit of a disappointing day. As you may or may not know, today was the day that I was going to be assessed for a new leg, which was going to be all the bells and whistles and all kicking and punching and you know, electronic knees and ankles and stuff. But unfortunately, I think I must have answered a few questions a little bit wrong and probably told a little bit more truth than perhaps I should have done. So I've actually not got that. That's not been offered to me. So I'm going back in 6 months. It's mostly due to the fact that my stump is still changing, so it's still changing shape. So once it gets to the shape that it's going to be, then they'll look into that. But I am getting a new socket, so that it's going to be smaller, and I may be able to put some long trousers on as well. So a bit disappointed, but you know, there you go. It's only 6 months I'm going to have to wait, which is it's nothing really. I mean, nothing at all in the old period of everything. Also, I'd like to mention as well, Ade's been in for some heart surgery today. Now I'm waiting for a message from him to see how he is. I'm sure he's okay. It's just a brief brief procedure, really. He's had to go under a general anaesthetic, so he's probably a bit groggy, and maybe still probably might not have come round. So hopefully I'll give you an update on Ade just as soon as I've got one. And also I just wanted to say as well, yeah, we're without Paul again. I hope you're okay, Paul. Nice to see you in the chat room yesterday, and if you're in there tonight, then our best wishes to you. What was I going to do? Right, so anyway, listen, what you've done is you've chosen to watch Raconteurs News tonight from 7 until 9, and so you're not watching, there's a TV show on at the moment where they're squeezing spots, so someone's got a spot and they squeeze it and it's on telly, and it's this woman that does this. She specialises in this. This is what TV. This is what passes as entertainment in 2019, as someone squeezing spots. I've got to say, I did watch one just out of curiosity, but once you've seen one great big massive 20-year-old blackhead squozen and like come out and like a long, once you've seen one of them, you've seen them all, really. And I've had plenty of them myself that I've squeezed, so I've seen them in real life. Yeah, so you've chosen to watch and listen to Raconteurs News tonight, and I've got we had no guests lined up, so last night I thought, wait, I'm gonna invite Cookie on, because I've been on Cookie's show. You probably know him. It's Harry Cookie Munster. He does a show on a Monday night straight after Raconteurs news, and he was on last night as well. I've thought, well, come on and just talk and talk and talk. I ain't got Paul with me, see. Paul's normally the one that's like talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, but he's not even with me. So I thought, let's get Eric Cookie Monster on. So good evening, Cookie. How are you doing, mate?
I'm very well, thank you. Well, I'm doing okay, put it that way. I'm going to be deliberately using as few words as possible now tonight.
No, don't, please.
Gas baiting. There you go, folks. It's better than watching spots being squeezed. That's fantastic. That is. That's more evidence for the pile. Whenever I want to start ranting about the state of society today, now that we're becoming the older generation. I can remember when I was a kid, my grandparents complaining about the state of the world today. You kids, you don't know you're born. Yeah, and now we're doing the same thing. Yeah, kids today watching TV or just some woman squeezing spots. What's that all about? It sounds like that kind of ageism.
But it's the kids these days. I think they are mostly turning away from television and getting all their entertainment from the internet. But they'll watch any old dross, won't they? I mean, it's all right. Someone might say, "Oh, whoever's watching this is watching some old dross." But the kids these days, they watch other people playing games, playing video games. So it's not actually the people doing anything. The people are playing video games, but it's turned into a huge industry.
Yep, Jesus. Well, the watching of computer game playing, like the Twitch, which is a different platform that does it in particular. YouTube does it a lot as well, but Twitch is the most popular one. But that has become an industry unto itself. And it is probably the second most profitable industry on the planet at the moment, the computer game industry. Behind drugs, probably, possibly. Yeah, we could put other things in that category as well, of the things that people make lots of money out of. But yeah, watching other people play computer games, and if ever you've looked at some of this stuff, in particular the Twitch platform, the watchers, the people viewing, the audience can donate to the person live while they're playing the game. So you're watching these people just playing a game, and there's people just literally like throwing money in the ring, as it were, while they're playing. But that is a new industry, a whole new economic cog wheel marketplace that they've been deliberately developing for the near future, including now, really, from now and getting worse into the future, when there's less and less actual work available for the people within your society. So what do? They give them these things that are entertainment based or service based. The industry is being switched because there are less and less jobs available now for most of the population. So you've got to give them something to do. And if they can earn a little bit of a living from basically entertaining people by playing computer games, at least they're doing something, and they're adding into that cycle of the economy.
But you've got to be suspicious, because these companies that are making fortunes out of this, there'll be companies set up that stream this stuff, and they've been making a fortune. The thing is that it's going to be pretty easy with the advent of AI and stuff like that to be able to give the impression that it's an actual human being that you're donating to and that's being paid and doing anything but playing this game, but yet the whole thing's just going to be a simulation. Yep. So therefore that's bound to be an inevitable end to that.
Well, it's already started. I'm not sure how far west it's spread so far, but there are already services in Japan, in Korea, that you can pay for, that are basically AI virtual character hosted shows and programs. Yeah, so there is no human presenter. There's no person playing the computer games or whatever the show is about. It's an AI system that uses a computer-generated character for those interactions. So that is already starting to happen. And you're right, it will inevitably become more and more that way, because for the business model, for the corporate principle, they're after profit. That is the motive. And to achieve profit, you have to perfect efficiency. To perfect efficiency, you reduce costs. Paying human employees is a cost. So if they can replace it with an AI system, they will. That's just business. That's the problem of the system being a mechanized system. There is no consideration for the cost to the living environment, which includes us. So a mechanized system will guaranteed become more and more and more mechanized. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's the biggest danger about this technological changeover that we're going through. Some of this stuff is great and fantastic, and it's really useful to us. It's going to make a major change in people's lives. Like for you, yeah, the kind of prosthetic that you could have available to you now is, I know this is a bit of a cheesy pun, but it's leaps and bounds beyond the wooden leg of 100 years ago. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That is immensely amazing and helpful to people. But at some point, we have to draw a line between, well, okay, now they can create robotic limbs that are better than human limbs. So why not let people chop their limbs off and replace them with robotic limbs? Why not? It's more efficient. You see, the problem of that mechanized hunt for efficiency or drive towards efficiency, there's no consideration for the living cost. And we will inevitably do ourselves in. That's the risk of it. Yeah, we will do ourselves in because there's always someone out there that's wanting to chase the profit. They want to make a buck. So they will press that button that says, oh, fire all the employees, replace them all with robots. I don't care about their lives. Yeah, now they've got no work, which means they've got no income, which means they're no longer participating in your economic cycles within your society. So your whole society starts to collapse. Sorry, a bit of a long, stretched out rant, but
you're making perfect sense, because we've got a situation now where there's a few people that have got most of the wealth in the world, and very few people have got most of the wealth in the world compared to the rest of us. So I mean, we're talking 0.001% has probably got half the money in the world. So it's like it's got to, at some point. I mean, what you do is you have like the people that have got nothing end up climbing all over each other, and then looking towards the people that have got all the wealth and looking to them for answers. And yet the answers that they're given by the people with the wealth are the ones that are going to extract more wealth from the many. So, it's like a mass psychosis.
Yes, and it's one that's been entrained into us from an early age for almost all of us. Some people manage to escape a lot of this or don't get subjected to it, whatever. But for the majority of us, right from birth, even from before birth, I've argued this before, because your environment affects the fetus within the mother as the fetus is growing. So even before birth, they are affecting our development, and they have developed a system. You can try it primarily, I can reference as example for this things like the Prussian school system, which was built upon to develop a working class of factory workers, people who were capable enough to be able to maybe put together complex parts or operate complex machinery, but were not educated highly enough to actually be able to question the situation they're in or that they've been subjected to, which still is an illusion of authority from above. That hierarchical structure which perpetuates a handful of people sat at the top who are reaming in all the wealth, all the resources to themselves. So that's just one part of it. There's a lot of other bits to the structure, but they have created, I've heard many people in the past talk about it as farming people. And in the long run, I do agree with that as a general metaphor or analogy to describe the situation. There are small numbers of people that only add up to like a few hundreds, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 total. But, you know, the last report that they put out a while ago was something like 26 billionaires on the planet own or have more money than nearly half the population of the planet. 26 people. So when you take that kind of scale into consideration, then yeah, you're talking only a small number of people are dominating the rest of the population because they've got them entrained into this situation of that hierarchical structure where you have to, if you're at the bottom with no or little resources or access to opportunity, etc., you have to fight amongst yourselves just to be able to survive, to support that whole structure that sits on top of it. This is long, you know, this is a thread that goes right back into history, but that abuse of psychology and spirituality, the energy of people in that way, is the key to how they perpetuate this bullshit. You know, people have everyday problems and complaints about what's going on in the world, as in they ain't got enough money to heat. You know, it's heat or eat. You know, that was brought up again this year, was the energy companies are raising their prices again. You know, the price of fuel supplies, energy supplies is going up again. Even though they report profits every year, they claim that they have to keep raising the price as well. Yeah, it doesn't add up unless it's to perpetuate that structure of those at the lower tiers of the hierarchy have to. You are required to remain at a certain standard of living, a certain totality of wealth. Because if you move up the pyramid, you destabilize the structure. Yeah, too many people successfully getting to the top would unbalance the structure and it would fall apart. So they don't allow the masses of the people to get above certain levels. That's why there's these like demarcation lines where there's things such as you want a high paying job, you have to have the piece of paper that says you've been through the academic system to give you a stamp of approval to say you're qualified for that job. Or you have to have a license that requires you to pay a percentage of your yearly profit if you're running your own company or something. You know, you have to buy this license that costs you like 10% of an entire year's profit just so that you're allowed to run that business and generate that profit in the first place. You know, there's these elements that are put in place that help keep the shape of the structure so that it doesn't become unbalanced and fall apart. Yeah. I know I've looked at this kind of stuff for many years, but I know there's plenty of arguments about how that structure can aid people in many different ways. Yeah, and you end up in this, it's a straw man argument where people try to claim that because, I'll talk about it from my own point of view, because I'm criticizing the government and the system and stuff like that, that means I don't appreciate the good things that have occurred in life. So our general standard of living is better now than it was 200 years ago for average people, you know, for the people who are supposedly, you know, at the bottom rung of the ladder, as it were. Yeah, okay, that's fairly true, but at what cost have we got to this stage? And why was there that cost? There's only been that cost because the system insists, those people that are sat up at the top, those small handful, those small few, insist that they want to perpetuate this system. So therefore, those at the bottom have to constantly pay a cost to get them to change it. And that cost is almost always blood. Yeah, as in you have to sacrifice your lives to get them to change the system. You know, we could go in, at that point, could go into a long conversation about things like the First World War. You know, it was nothing to do with any genuine geopolitical reasons. It was a cull, a mass cull of the population of Europe, and it allowed them to shuffle the borders of various nations and make new arrangements and contracts which led into the new century. That's the whole, it was a readjustment of the interrelations between all the European nations of that century. That's why they did it. Nothing to do with, oh, they're bad people and we have to protect the world from those bad people and shit. Nah, but things like that are done deliberately to perpetuate that structure. And that structure in the long run, this is my argument, this is what I'm saying, it's a straw man to talk about the good stuff and whatever. That structure is more detrimental than it is beneficial. We've gained very, very slightly over centuries. It's taken centuries to claw back a tiny, tiny bit of benefit or prosperity or healthiness, whatever you want to call it or define it as, to get something that benefits us, the mass of the people. Whereas those at the top have just skyrocketed. So that now there's 26 billionaires that own more wealth than half the planet. If you look at the wealth gap as a scale, as like a graph that lays out the differences, you see the distance, the literal graphical distance between the poorest people and the richest people. It's insane. If the poorest person on the planet was average height, say 5'8", which is about average for most of the planet now, then the richest person on the planet would be over a mile tall. That's the kind of difference you talk. That's the insane scale of difference. That's why now we've got nations, countries across the world, and really it's starting to happen here in the UK, has been building up for a few decades really, where you have extreme and stark differences between rich and poor. So you look at some of Brazil's one of the places you can see it quite clearly. The difference between the favelas, which are like the shantytown ghettos that are literally built right up against the 5-star super high class skyscrapers with their own private security gated community. That's like billionaires literally living right against the poorest of the poor. That's the state of play, thanks to that hierarchical structure that those few people keep insisting that we have to perpetuate. And I'm not a communist. Just to caveat that before a lot of people think, oh, he's talking communism. No, not at all. Yeah.
Well, you won't put a label on yourself, would you? You know.
I tried to put very, very few. Very few.
You don't want to put. Listen, brilliant talking so far. 23 minutes in, we've got Harry Cooke in Munster has joined us on Raconteurs News, and check out his show. Find him on YouTube. It's Harry Cooke Munster, like as in the monsters. So don't make the mistake I made when I first tried to search for him. But yeah, he's you find him on YouTube. Subscribe to him. Watch him live as well. He's on just after us at 9 o'clock on a Monday night, and there are various. If you subscribe anyway, you'll know when he's on. Just for everybody that's playing Webingo. I know he's not here, so I just thought that I'd just stick a few in. So I'm going to start off with Andy Bastard. So that's your first one, and Bills of Exchange. That's your second one. So there's your first two numbers on Webingo. Anyway, getting back to, I don't know where you really want to go. I mean, I wanted to talk. We were talking before, and I mentioned the Tommy Robinson BBC thing that he's going to be doing. He reckons he's going to be doing in a couple of weeks' time. And we had quite an interesting discussion about these people that come along and things to look out for, and what made you suspicious.
Stephen Yaxley Lennon.
That's the boy.
What made me suspicious of him?
You know what? I'm asking you questions, man.
I'm laughing because that's like just a year's worth of stuff. It does go back years because I've been doing this kind of thing since about 2010, but the first year and a half of it, I was still in a learning phase. I still am in a learning phase, but at the time I was surprised by the level of interference in this environment. It took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting the kind of, sort of underhand and shady shit that went on in this environment. I was as naive as most YouTube users or internet users. Like, oh, platform where you can put videos up about, oh yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, cool. And then you find out what it's actually like, sort of behind the stage, as it were. Yeah, I started back in about 2010. After about a year and a half or so, by part way through 2011 going towards 2012 and all the Occupy movement, that helped me see a lot more of that kind of level of interference actually happening directly. Yeah, I had notice of it because I could see it going on in front of me. Like the stuff about Occupy with the tents. When I mentioned in the chat a couple of shows ago that you did, and I mentioned it then about some of the tents being empty, I wasn't trying to suggest that they were like phantom tents, that they were completely empty, but they were certainly not there because there was one or two people that required them to be there. My point being, there was a small number of people that had planned to camp there, yeah, to set up the tents and camp, right. But they brought more tents than they needed. Yeah, so if you've got like 50 people and you only need so many tents to house that 50 people, they brought extra. Now, could be said that they did that so that they could, you know, provide tents for other people. And sure, yeah, I don't think that was their genuine intention. Their genuine intention was to make it look as occupied as they possibly could. So they brought enough tents with them so they could make it look good. Yeah, you know, set up loads of tents.
The name of the game in anything,
yes, but to me, that was an element of the presentation that was part of the chip in the wall that helped me say, hang on, there's too much shit going on here. This is not organic. This is organized by different groups and blah, blah. And I learned more quite rapidly over the days after that, yeah. But the presentation thing is like, well, that's a falsehood. You're trying to present a certain imagery for PR reasons to the public, yeah, public relation, yeah. So to me, it's like, why are you using illusion and trickery and shit like that? You don't need to. But that's my difference between a lot of the shit that goes on around those kind of events and activism. But I was doing that, and then I didn't exactly chat with him or encounter him directly, but he was around at some of the marches that went on in London around that time. You know, there was a I can't remember what name they go. I think it was the March Against Austerity, or it might have been the Union's March Against Austerity or something like that. But there was a few different protest marches that happened in London that I went down and joined in with. And I saw Stephen Yaxley Lennon around in the background at that time, plus a few other of the names that tend to regularly turn up on the internet. And I didn't exactly think that much of it. I thought, yeah, he's one of those people off the internet who talks about stuff from wherever, and he's there, yeah. But then over the years, as I looked at more of his stuff, and I started, this has got a real sort of tinge of a certain kind of rhetoric to it, and it's definitely leaning one direction in a political left-right sense. But then I found other information online that just made so many connections that show he's funding from people like Sarah Gellar. I don't know if you know that name, Sarah Gellar.
No.
There's other names in the chain of connections, and his own self-professed agreement with Zionism and the attitude of, well, Israel's got the right to defend itself, and all that usual kind of fallacious argumentation. And when questioned further about it, he demonstrated no real knowledge on the ideas or the principles or even, you know, the thing that he was defending, but he just agreed with it. Yeah. And that helped me see a more definite, it sort of cemented those connections that I'd read about on other places on the internet. It was sort of like, you're basically just a shill for a certain nation state or wannabe nation state in the Middle East. And you don't even seem to really know what you're talking about in that sense. You're just doing what you're told. And then over the years, as I've watched what he's done, and the way he's tried to present himself to the British public, it reminds me a lot of a character called Oswald Mosley. I think I might have said this the last time we chatted, yeah. So I won't spend too much time on it, but just to sort of wrap it up, he reminded me a lot of a character called Oswald Mosley, who was an enabled firebrand that the system used to recruit people into what was at the time a fascist ideology, the National Socialist ideology that was coming out of Germany at the time, yeah. And I think that's what he's doing at the moment. I know people will use, again, all this becomes just like argumentum ad infinitum. People will respond to that by saying things like, oh, you're just calling him a Nazi, you're just using a derogatory label, and you're not really listening to him, and blah, blah. I listened to him and others like him for years. After a while, you've heard enough. Yeah, you've heard it so many times. It's like, mate, I know what you're going to say, and I know the kind of arguments you're going to use, and I know what direction you're going to be sending people because you've said it so many times. And it adds up to, they want people to go to the right. They won't say that they want people to go to the extreme right because they need to keep plausible deniability. But they are, in effect, encouraging people to go to the right of the political spectrum. They're doing that at the moment because, and this is sort of moving away from Stephen Yaxley Lennon, because he's just a bit part player in a big game. He's a little fish in a very big pond. The most powerful thing that he'll probably ever, or the powerful legacy that he'll leave behind, is if and when they martyr him, because then they'll be able to use him as an icon to more effect, yeah, to influence people. But they want people to go to the right at the moment because the system itself is trying to, or presenting this idea that it's setting itself up as being very left. Yeah, the system is growing into what many people are pointing at and saying that's like communism. Yeah, they want this kind of no jobs, no money, no property. You know, a lot of the stuff to do with Agenda 21, 2030 is very communistic in its principles and what they're trying to implement. So because the system looks like that's what it's wanting to do, the public's natural reaction is to go the other direction. Yeah, that's just natural reaction in people. They don't like what this thing is showing itself to be, so they go the other way. So as they go in that direction, they have these firebrands, these puppets, these Pied Pipers already set up like a catcher's mitt to catch people and put them in the correct corral that they want, so their energy remains contained and controlled and is still useful to the system because it justifies what the system is doing. So, for example, somebody like him encourages a bunch of people to go and meet up at a protest somewhere. They turn up. As I said earlier, plausible deniability will mean the organisers will say, like, oh, we don't want you to get crazy or violent or be extreme or anything like that. But under their banner, that will happen. And then the system will use that as a justification to increase laws or legislation to put more armed police in our society, because they'll say, oh, we need these there because of the crazy far-right extremists that are smashing up the cities. Do you see how that works? Yeah. So they need a certain number of people to go to that right-hand side. Yeah, so that's why for me over the years, it's like, no, I stay far away from him and his shit. Well, not far away, but I stay away from it. I try not to feed it. I don't ignore it. I'll talk to people about it like we are now, but I try not to feed it. So I don't do like, debunking campaigns against him. I don't pump out videos talking about him all the time, because that just fuels what they want. Bad press for them is just as good as any other press. So you talking about him, great. You've just promoted him on your channel. Yeah. So I step around it and I make sure to always use his legal name so that people know he's presenting himself as a falsehood. Yeah, he's playing a character, just like Alex Jones. He's a character.
Yeah, And that's really what the entire world is. It's just characters, isn't it? Everyone's playing a part. Everyone's playing a role, and somebody's obviously directing it. I just wanted to say, I've just had a message from Ade. He's I sent him a message earlier on asking him how he was, and he's said that he's had a bit of a rough day. He's had a bit of a rough day, but I'm okay. Definitely not dead yet. And he's still in hospital. He's feeling a bit rough. So get well soon, Ade, if you're managing to be listening to us there. Well, I mean,
some energy.
Sorry?
Send him some energy.
Yeah, energy. We'll give him some good energy. I wish I had some energy myself.
He's obviously not feeling too bad because he was able to get a bit of a joke in there. So, that means he's with it. So
yeah,
that's good,
it'll take a lot more to take him down than that. Motorbike accidents almost a year apart that, knackered him up, really. So he's a fighter, old Ade, and he'll be on his, put this out of the way, he'll be on his way to Thailand in no time. So good for him. He'll be able to get his wick dipped, as they say. Anyway, was there anything that you wanted to talk about? I mean, I'm just sitting here. I mean, I'm hanging on your every word. I mean, it's just, but where do you want to go now?
There's nothing in particular that I can immediately think of. I don't know. Ask me a question, or ask the chat room.
Yeah, let's have a look in chat room. Let's see what's going on in chat room.
I mean, there's so many different things, so many different topics. We could talk about loads of different things. But
hello to everybody who's in the chat room. Richard Kinsett's in there. Rebel Media got a lot of exposure up to the Brexit referendum, as did the alt-right in the States. Dave Irons in there. Committed Escaper, Mr. Mann, Society of the Spectacle, Roberto Carlos. Hello, Roberto. You want to fancy coming out of retirement and coming to play for Sheffield Wednesday? Lop some anthro. Olive oil can go fungusy in the ear. Yes, very good.
See, that's important information, genuinely. Yeah.
It is important, isn't it? Don't put olive oil in your ear and let it go fungusy. Oh dear me! Well, this is what happens when you you're missing what's his face? Oh, Gass's Webby. See, I'm Webby. Gas and electric's free, by the way, everybody. So you can cross that one off your charts.
He's only been gone one night, and you can't remember his name.
I know, terrible. It's terrible of me. It's because I've had a joint, not marijuana, a joint of beef earlier on. We don't. Well, we do.
You don't, but you do.
Yeah, we do. So,
what do you think of the changes over the cannabis? Well, I was going to say laws, but it's not really laws, is it? The situation over cannabis in the UK.
Oh, it's crap, isn't it? It's ridiculous. It's a plant. I just don't understand. If you're gonna legalize it, you might as well just say, right, okay, you can grow it yourself if you want. But that's not what it's going to happen, is it? It's going to be their version that's approved, and they'll farm it, and it'll have God knows what in it. Monsanto, it'll have GMOs in it, and all sorts of crap, and it'll be nowhere near as nice. See, if you're gonna, it's like, this Ferrari that we're having at the moment over plastic. Mm-hmm. Everything's all this, plastic, that, and it's killing our oceans. Fucking ban it then. Ban plastic as to be used as a package, a one-time only use plastics. Ban them. There you go. That's it. Ban them. You don't fucking want to ban them because there's too much fucking money in it. And
replace them with hemp plastic.
Yeah, hemp plastic. Anything.
Fully biodegradable. 100% biodegradable.
But you see, what they do is they screen these fucking initiatives, that they want to get rid of plastic because it's killing our oceans. And yet, okay, well, ban plastic then. That's all easy. Boom, it's done. But of course, oil industry's quite dependent on plastic as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they're the main producer. That's what it's made out of. And, you know, you tie that into the pharmaceutical industry as well, and the food industry, not just in the sense of packaging, but also the way it's sort of used in various ways as filler, put it that way. You think that's real rice you're eating, or is it plastic rice? I know that's a bit of an urban myth, but the amount that material is used is really just an excuse to create profit for the oil industry, because there are many other ways that we could fill the function that plastic is being used for.
Yeah, and it is in everything. My missus has just said that it's used in hair conditioner as well, plastic. So there's plastic in air conditioner. So you got, but it's like it's everywhere. Yeah, it'd be so easy to ban, but yet they don't, and yet there's all these campaigns, and you've got these different. I saw an advert where they've got these reusable cups, and they're designed by people, and you think one of them's like one of them fucking princesses, one of them, you know, one of them not very good looking princesses,
the ugly mingers.
The Mingers, yeah, one of Eugene. She's, you know, got a mother's looks and a father's as well.
Well, you know, they got to protect the bloodline. So, you know, a few ugly ones will mean, you know, they're guaranteed that some of them will survive. Unless they lock them in the tower. But you know, a lot of plastics that are used at the moment can be replaced with hemp plastic, and that's 100% biodegradable, easy to produce. Yeah, so why don't they do that? Because again, it would take away from that oil industry and that dominance of the oil industry, because the oil industry supports a massive part of the entire infrastructure of most societies now. You know, it's not just fuel in your car, it's things like the plastic, and we're surrounded by stuff made out of plastic. Yeah. So you think of it that way, it's like the oil industry fuels a large percentage of your entire society. So they ain't going to get away with it that quickly. They get rid of it that quickly. And a lot of the campaigning stuff that's done, and I know people often find this a difficult conversation, you know, they can be triggered by it because they're similar to other subjects. People feel that they're being attacked personally. You know, they're being called bad people for not caring, or even considering the idea to be not caring, etc. But like a lot of the charities, most of these campaigns to do with banning things like plastic are just steam valves for public angst, and they're used as a secondary or even tertiary income generating system. You think of all the money, and I know this is a slightly separate topic, but it is connected because of the pharmaceutical connections. But you think of the cancer industry, yeah, and I call it cancer industry because that is what it's become. There is literally billions of pounds put into that industry every year, and there are no cures forthcoming. If anything, the situation's got worse. There's now more cancers and more people with cancer. So that kind of that kind of charitable venting not only allows people to vent their concern, their worries, or to help themselves feel better by feeling like, you know, oh, at least I'm doing something, I've contributed to the fund and stuff like that, or I've ran the charity run to raise money for the research and whatever. And that's the point, it generates money. And the main charities, you know, I'll be careful to say the main charities, the institutionalized charities, because this is not true of all charities out there. You know, but those big ones, those institutionalized ones, hardly any of the money that you donate goes through to the actual cause that they're trying to help with. So, you know, you lose a large percentage of the value of every pound donated is absorbed by the running costs of the charity itself. Yeah, running costs, because they include things like expenses and shit like that. Yeah. So to me, it's a scam. It's a double scam. because not only is the oil industry still fueling that whole infrastructure of utilizing plastic in our lives all over the place in various ways, they are at the same time encouraging people to take part in these campaigns and to create this air of, oh, well, we're doing something bad, we're sorting it out. They're not really. They're going through a transition phase. Most of the big oil industry companies, or all of them, are going through a transition phase where they're trying to rebrand themselves as being clean energy, green energy, new technology, all this kind of stuff. But the reality is they're still utilizing oil in all parts of the industrialized system, as they have been for the last 200 years, 150 years. Yeah. Is it 150? Maybe, just about ish.
Yeah.
But I was going to say things like that frustrate me, but it's sort of like, I get the idea now that inevitably there are those kind of things that occur in society simply because the mass of society is in a state of mind or a level of ignorance that they're not aware that that kind of shit is being done to them. It's like what we're saying about the Pied Pipers, like Yaxley Lennon. You know, for most people, they don't look into the situation for an in-depth enough analysis such that they can take a step back and look at the situation and go, hang on, if I get involved in that, is my energy actually going to be going towards the goal I'm trying to achieve? Or is it being subverted into somebody else's cause? For example, the people that control him that want me to support what they're doing. I don't support what they're doing, so they're trying to capture me through that alternative network, as it were, yeah? Through that alternative route. In the same way, a lot of the charitable stuff does the same thing. And I don't blame people who are trying to do something good. You know, they're trying to help people, they're trying to better the world or whatever, but they're getting exploited by those charities and by campaigns like the ban the plastic thing. If we're going to deal with the problem of plastic, let's be honest about it and not just do stupid things like ban plastic straws. That to me was just a gimmick. It is totally just a gimmick, because they knew it would be something that would affect a large number of the population, because so many people at some point in an average daily life encounter that or have the opportunity to encounter it. So they're in a fast food restaurant, they get a drink, it's got a straw in it. Yeah? They're in a cafeteria, they get a drink, it's got a straw in it. There's straws on the counter, there's straws on the counter in your chip shop, etc., etc. They know a lot of people will encounter it, so it will make a direct point to a large demographic of the public. That's all they were doing it for, not because they seriously wanted to try and deal with the plastic problem.
And also there's at least somebody's doing something. That's you know, that there's that as well. And also, you know, with people that when they get involved with these big charities, you know, they go and something's organized, they're all herded towards this big field where they're going to run around and get muddy, and they're going to raise money for cancer researchers or whatever. You know, cancer's the big one, isn't it? Cancer's like the daddy. It's the daddy of all the charities. But what it does is it offsets people's survival guilt as well, because they feel like they've done something. You know, and they might know somebody who's died of cancer, and the fact that this is really exploited, and the psychology behind it, exploiting that, it's really quite sinister, but it's broad everywhere, no matter where you look, what spectrum of life you're looking, whether it's retail, whether it's advertising, whether it's your everyday life, your mobile phone, it's full on completely. And it's no wonder there's a huge spike in mental illness in people. But all these people are coming out with these studies, but they're not, you know, you'll hear them, and a study has said that social media may be responsible for the growth of mental health issues in young people, and it'll be on, and that'll be it. That's it. You'll hear it one time, and that'll be it. There'll be no right. What are we doing? Why are we doing this? But can't we do something about this? You know, or even
that will
advice.
that
Well,
will. Well, I think it already has started, as in the suggestion of solutions from the system, because this mental health agenda thing is an agenda. It's not a reality. Not for the majority of people. There is not a massive spike in mental illness. There just isn't. Yeah, not in genuine mental illness. Because if you look at the main system they use for diagnosing people, the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual or something like that, I think it means, that has grown over the decades. It's got fatter and fatter and fatter with the number of classifications and labels for diagnoses for them to give to people. So it's not that there's been an increase in mental health problems, not across the board. There have been some spikes in certain areas like autism. Yeah, that absolutely has spiked, because that's connected to other stuff we can come back to. But the general level of people's mental illness has not gone up. Most of it is down to reclassification, so that now an overly energetic child is classified with something like ADHD or ODD or whatever, and they're given pills, they're given chemicals. Those chemicals will amplify any problems that may have already been there in the long term. Yeah, at the beginning of use, they may suppress a lot of the problems, but through long-term use, they cause worse problems. They cause various brain damage and stuff like that. So things like dementia and whatever in later life. But the other aspect to it is, there is a need for the system to have more people registered as mentally ill, because in a similar fashion to like what I was talking about earlier with the situation, the employment situation, work for people, in the same way, they can take people off the statistics because they reclassify them as mentally ill. So they're no longer, as one example of part of the situation, they're no longer on the unemployed list. They're now on the mentally ill list. So it's a way for them to shuffle numbers so that they can present PR shit to the public. Yeah. So they can say, oh, look how good we're doing. Everybody's employed, or that 80% of the population is employed. But you look at the figures and they're not including all those ones that are currently incapable of working and stuff like that. At the same time, there is a level of, this is where it connects into things like Agenda 2030 and the technocratic communism, as many people like to call it. It's not communism, it's technocracy. There is a difference, but it's technocratic socialism more than anything else. But part of that is that they want people to be wards of the state, because a parasite requires a host for it to live on. So if, for example, we're using a simplified example just to try and explain what's actually going on, because it's quite a complex picture in reality. Yeah? Politicians only have a job because you want them to do the job. You ask them to do the bureaucracy and organising stuff that needs to be done in your country, in your nation state. So you employ these people to do that job. A strata of that employment, that work that they do, includes caring for people who are considered wards of the state. In other words, they are, for whatever reason, currently incapable of supporting themselves. So the state is there to provide the care. Yeah, it has that duty of care to look after people when they can't look after themselves. That is really the definition of a ward of the state. You are cared for by the state because you can't care for yourself, supposedly. But that enables a feedback loop of the employment of those politicians. So for the politician, for the career politician, it's in their best interests to have more mentally ill people, because then there's more wards of the state, which creates more justification and more economic flow for the state because for every ward of the state, the system can turn around and go, oh, we need to provide funds for that individual so they can feed themselves, so we print some more money. In the act of printing money, we're generating debt, and that can be manipulated in the fractional reserve system such that, we only printed £10 originally, but now we've got £1,000 that we can utilise. So having people who are registered as mentally ill benefits the state system, benefits the structure of statism. Yeah. So they have been deliberately for the past decade plus, I think going back to the 90s, really. It started heavily in the 90s with Tony Blair's New Labour, and they started talking about mental health care and stuff like that back then. They've been pushing towards this idea that, hey, everybody's got a mental illness. Don't feel excluded. Let's talk about mental illness. Everybody's got something wrong with them. You know, sometimes you feel a bit down. You had some shit happen in your life and it's making you feel a bit down. Oh, you must be depressed. You're obviously depressed. Oh, that's a mental illness, right? Put you on the mental illness list. At the same time, one of the most insidious things which really annoys me is this insistence that everyone is on the spectrum. That is dehumanizing. I'm not suggesting to the people who genuinely have some level of autism, who genuinely are on the spectrum, but it's dehumanizing to the majority, to everybody else, because what they're trying to suggest, if you accept that premise, then that means the human condition is a mental illness. Because if everybody is on the spectrum, then there is no normality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
So by them persuading us, or this is what they're trying to do, if you accept what they're suggesting, that everybody is on the spectrum somewhere, then that means they're convincing you that your condition is one of insanity, which means you need to be cared for. In other words, they've just usurped your sovereignty in yet another way, and you have now become a ward of the state. They can step in at any moment just on their decision and say, oh, we've decided now this guy's too far on the spectrum, or he's got this certain classification, therefore we can just usurp his authority. He can be taken away, he can be sectioned, he can be put into an institution, whatever. Yeah, and this is why it annoys me, because they were exploiting a genuine problem, i.e. what is called autism, the problems that are called autism. And they're using that, they're exploiting that genuine problem and trying to apply it as a weapon. They're weaponizing it and applying it to everyone else, or, giving that impression that that's what they want you to accept. They want you to accept the idea that we're all on the spectrum at some point. These kind of things are deliberately to mess with people's psychology, their comprehension, and in doing so, bringing them under that banner of the state, so that now it justifies the state. You need us because you need caring for.
Yeah, I suppose there's also it's the net has been spread so wide, like you were saying, that the book of different disorders is getting bigger and bigger. My missus mentioned borderline personality disorder. I mean, God knows what that is. It's just something ridiculous. But we've got a bit of experience with this, because we did a show a couple of years ago in December, I think 2015 or around about that, 2016. And you'll find it's Raconteurs News. It's a mental health special, and we had a friend of ours who we'd met, who was she was a surgeon. And she'd uncovered some corruption within her work, and had been whistleblowing and had been chucked out and sacked and basically undrawn and quartered. And what had happened, what eventually they did, to cut a long story short, I mean, you can find it on YouTube or knocking about somewhere. What she did is what they ended up doing is they sectioned her. under the Mental Health Act, and they locked her up, and she was in a secure unit. And we went down to see her a couple of times. Thankfully, my missus is really up on law, and she found a part of the law that meant that we were able to get her straight out. So we managed to get her out, and she's managed to stay out ever since. But they certainly were using it as a weapon in her case, and I'd urge anybody to go and find that show, because it really is eye-opening.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're at break, aren't we?
Yeah, just gone 8 o'clock.
Just gone 8 o'clock. Right, I'll play a couple of records, and get me some a drink, and then we'll be back. Raconteurs news. It's Jason Holmes and Harry Cooke Munster. We are going to be back in just a couple of shakes of someone's penis. Well, mine.
I ain't shaking it.
Starting to see a conspiracy been fooling me when I watch TV. Their manufactured views all over the news. It's giving me the blues, and it's time to choose. Starting to wake up from this sleep, from all the lies they spread to run so deep. But I will lace no more. Who are they fighting for? It isn't me. But now I see there is a new world order, but we're not invited. So much blood and murder from the drones unsighted. World War III is haunting me. I've got to find a way to save my family. The human race has lost its way. We put our trust in science, but it's us who pay. Used to be civilized, but we've been compromised. We're on a one-way train. We gotta break this chain. Starting to see that we should be free. The powers that be want a piece of me. Should I do what they say or tell them go away? What is the price for freedom? Cause it sure ain't free. The time has come to raise the bar. There'll be nowhere to hide if there's a third world war. So let your voice be heard and let your heart decide to stand and fight for freedom while you've still got time. Wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up. Stand up. Stand up, stand up. Wake up, wake up. The time has come to fight. Wake up, wake up. Don't waste another night. Stand up. What are you waiting for? Stand up, stand up. Oh, they're gonna soon be at your door. Florence Nightingales, not enough Robin. Too many halos, not enough heroes. Coming up with the goods. So you thought you'd like to change the world. Decided to stay, jump will say. For the poor, for the poor. So You thought you'd like to change the world, decided to stage a jumble save for the poor, for the poor. It's a waste of time if you don't try shaking your box in front of the queen. 'Cause the first is right at first. It's a waste of time if you know what they mean. Hands, too many pockets, not enough hands on hearts. Too many ready to call it a day before the day starts. So you thought you'd like to see them heal. God will be state and appeal for the poor, for the poor. So you thought you'd like to see them heal. Got to be the state and appeal for the poor, for the poor. It's a waste of time if you know what they mean. Try shaking your box in front of the queen. 'Cause the first is right out first. It's a waste of time if you know what they mean. It's a waste of time if you know what they mean. Try shaking your box in front of the queen. 'Cause the purse is flat out bursting at the seams. It's a waste of time if you know what they mean.
There you go. That's Heath Dweft. A couple from him, Wake Up, first of all, and then after that it was Flag Day. Welcome back to Raconteurs News for the second hour this evening. No Webby. I did notice somebody asking where Webby was. He's having this week off for some personal reasons. I'm sure he'll be back and on top form next week. And we are still playing Web Bingo, just for him. I need to try and think of one. I can't think of one yet. Heating or eating? I think you said that one earlier on. Cooke,
I did mention it. Yeah.
So you were inadvertently calling bingo for Webby.
Oh, it's an inside job, mate. I got somebody out there marking a card for me.
Cards are available at reception, by the way. If anybody, let's have a look what's going on in chat room. Say hello to a few people who are in there. Roberto Carr, Super Leeds, Mr. Mann. Did somebody? That it was Kendo Taylor that asked if where's Webby? Jason hasn't castrated him as well, has he? So there you go. That's no, I've not castrated him. I'm sure. I don't think I'd be able to hold him down. To be fair, what do you reckon? I don't think I'd be able to hold him down.
I don't know. I'll offer him a chucky biscuit. You know, keep him distracted. Confuse him with the choice. Do you want mint or orange? I think that was the one thing I saw in the chat. The main question is, do you want mint or orange chocolate biscuit?
Well, anyway, Webby, hurry back, mate. We do miss you. So, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to ask you first of all tonight, in the second hour, tell us about your show. I wanted you to tell us about your show. What is it about? What do you do? What inspired it? What you're hoping? What your hopes? To gain from it, or well, not to gain, or just to share wisdom.
What's it all about, Alfie? What's it all about, Alfie? Yeah, this might be a bit confusing. Sometimes it is a little confusing, the show is sometimes a little confusing. I know it's confusing for me as well. I'm sure for some of the audience that listen, oh, what the hell is he talking about? My aim with it, my hope with it, is it just helps people to improve their own thinking. That's the main thing, because over the years I've been being in this environment and seeing the way things play out and the way things operate in this environment. And I don't know all the ins and outs. I'm not a partner with YouTube and doing all that kind of shit. Yeah, I certainly ain't got any of the inside stuff on YouTube or whatever. I've never monetized my channel. I refused their offer when they offered it to me years ago. I think it was 2012. They offered me a YouTube partnership, and I said no, thank you. And that's just because I didn't want to attach money to it. Even though now I've ended up in a situation where I've asked to ask for help. So I do have a link in my info box on my videos so people can donate if they want to help me out. But I don't want to monetize it because I find the whole industry that's developed around the subculture, or what was originally a subculture, it's now become a norm. It's now trendy to be interested in conspiracies and alternative ideas and stuff like that, the occult and UFOs and whatever. It's trendy. So there's this whole industry that exists that endlessly just churns over the same old crap and just generates money out of it. And it's a way to earn a living for people. You know, some of it is just entertainment. You know, there's quite a bit of it out there that is just entertainment. But after having a go for a while at trying to be a kind of, you know, doing that online activism kind of stuff, as well as like I was doing at the time a lot more physical participation. You know, I was going to meetups and going to protests and stuff like that. But it became difficult for me to sustain that for various reasons. So I started concentrating more on just the online stuff. But the online activism it's pushed into a corral where now it's just immensely worse. It's been pushed into this corral where the social media platforms have taken dominance over the situation, and it has just become a circus, literally a circus. Yeah, like Twitter is just an argument. It's a continuous argument. And there's just these armies, whether they're all bots or not is, you know, another part of the problem. But even if they're genuine people, they get recruited into these campaigns where it's just like a Twitter storm campaign. Yeah, you get thousands of people bombarding one other person with texts and tweets and all this, saying you're a horrible person, or you're wrong, or you're this, or you're that. And it's just become craziness. It's a continuous argument ad infinitum. And in this environment, what I encountered more and more was these recurrent difficulties, stuff that I felt, well, I may not have, you know, got completely over certain things. You know, I still have my own difficulties. I'm still learning. I think people can be, or some people can fall into an extreme arrogance where they think they've figured it all out. They've got all the answers. They're the one that knows everything, and they're going to tell you this, that, and the other, all that kind of shit. You know, I think you've got to be realistic and say you don't know everything. You're still learning. You might know a lot about something. You might know a hell of a lot about a particular subject or whatever, but that doesn't mean you know everything, mate. Yeah.
Well, if they think they know everything, if someone thinks they know everything, then they've learned nothing.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Through my life, I've been interested in things that were a bit sort of on the outskirts, on the fringes. I was into you know, UFOs and stuff when I was a kid. I was interested in mysteries and stuff like that. So that interest led me over the years to be interested in stuff like psychology, religion, spirituality, energy, physics, UFOs, cosmology, astrology, loads of different topics. But a lot of the stuff I was interested in was things that were considered fringe, alternative theories. So I was interested in the alternative theories as explanations for some of the stuff I was looking at, yeah? rather than just accepting the mainstream academic standard point of view. And part of that interest as well was included philosophy, and learning about philosophy helped me a lot. Yeah, I started doing the academic route, or I was doing a degree at one point, but I gave up on it because I wasn't planning to get a career working in academia or anything like that. I didn't need the certificate at the end of the degree, and I felt restricted and just pressured. It was that kind of pressure effect which I was putting on myself, yeah, because I was the one choosing to do the course, so therefore I'm putting the pressure on myself. But I just felt like I don't need that. I can study this stuff on my own, at my own pace, going whatever direction I want, because I'm not after that certificate. So I gave up on doing the degree. But my point being, it did, all the stuff I was learning, it helped me a lot. When it came to this environment, and over those first few years, I could see how there are these recurrent problems that people trip over. And a lot of them are easily alleviated with just a small amount of learning about philosophy. So things like logical fallacies. You know, people get stuck in arguments. They get into heated arguments and stuff like that with people because either themselves or the other person is tripping over a logical fallacy, but insisting that it's the truth, it's the truth. And that's easily alleviated once people learn about those kind of things. Yeah? That combined with a certain elements of psychology about how people learn knowledge, how people are affected by their own biases, their own preconceptions, their own social masks that we all wear when we're interacting with the world, stuff like that. And I thought more about what was going on in this environment. And at that time, I know this is a long explanation. Hopefully it will make sense in the end. At that time, it was approaching 2012. There was a lot of stuff that had gone on in my life that had led me to that point where I had the opportunity to partake in an ayahuasca weekend retreat. And it was something that I wanted to do. I've been interested and have utilized entheogens, plant medicines, over the course of my life in different situations, and I've learned a lot from it. So I thought, yeah, I want to do that. I want to see what I can learn from it, see what it's all about, you know, etc. And I had a fantastic opportunity thanks to a very good friend. I went to this weekend. We did the ayahuasca ceremony, drank the tea and everything. And afterwards, when I come back to this environment, because that kind of experience, you don't just like do it and then think, oh, I learned this. Oh, that was great. Yeah, go back to work again. Yeah. The kind of things you experience tend to take a fair amount of time to process if you're honest with yourself. And an experience like ayahuasca requires you to be honest with yourself. The more you try to deceive yourself on what you're shown and what you're thinking about, the more uncomfortable you will find the experience. So ayahuasca in particular, this was my experience. So anyway, ayahuasca in particular confronts you with a mirror of yourself. So if you have shit going on in your own personality, if you have egotistical hang-ups and stuff like that, it will present that to you, and it's like the ugly picture of Dorian Gray. You can't turn away from it because it won't let you. It will follow you and keep presenting it to you like a mirror. Yeah. So it's a very in-depth learning process for most people that experience it, and doing that takes a while to process after the experience. You know, it takes a while to think about all the stuff you saw and thought about, etc. So it's doing that and looking at this environment and what I was doing in this environment with the kind of posting of videos and sharing of stuff that I was doing at the time with my channel. And it brought to mind all those problems of like, well, I keep seeing this same kind of stuff, like people trip over the same mistake that somebody else made last week. You know, it's like there's this transient stream of people that have been passed through this environment, through this internet environment, and the system wants to grab them up via those catcher's mitts, like I mentioned earlier, characters like Alex Jones and whatever, the industrialized truth givers that are there just to generate a profit, an economic profit, but at the same time, they are the limited hangouts that deal out the mistruths and misdirections to deliberately keep people stuck in the problem situation that we're often talking about, the big problems. So I thought, how do I better do what I'm trying to do? The goal I'm trying to achieve is not to convince or persuade people that they must do things that I think are good. Yeah, because then I just become like another aspect of the system. If I go around insisting that, hey, you should never, ever cut your hair. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing it? Stop it, stop it, stop. I insist that you must do what I'm telling you to do. Yeah, that kind of level of persuasion is exactly what the system does. So I thought instead I'm going to try approaching it from a different angle. And a lot of the things revolve around philosophy, psychology, metaphor and analogy. I use a lot of metaphor and analogy because it's symbolic language. Symbolic language can convey bigger meanings, more complex ideas than using very, hard empirical language. If you stick just purely to the absolute definitions of a word, etc., then yeah, you can relate factual information. It's perfect for relaying empirical data. You need to be accurate to the empirical data of the observations, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to things like philosophy and psychology and spirituality and stuff like that, empirical language doesn't really work. It's non-applicable because you struggle to describe what it is you're talking about or trying to talk about. Yeah? So thinking about this kind of stuff, I thought, okay, I'm going to try this where I'm going to talk about things that are somewhat obscure or obtuse, or they seem to come from a bit of an angle. But what I'm trying to do is step back from a situation and turn it to an angle that most people haven't seen before or haven't considered. So I'll try and talk about ideas using metaphor so that I can present what may be an old idea to people, but in a way that maybe they haven't thought about it this way before. Maybe haven't heard it presented this way before. And that difference of perception helps give them a more holistic picture of what you're talking about. So philosophy in particular is immensely important, which is why I bang on about it so much. And I'm not a PhD professor of philosophy and stuff like that. I can get into the jargon and stuff if that's, if I feel necessary to, if I feel it's required. But most of the time I try and avoid that because I want this to be accessible to people who haven't gone and studied at higher level education. The layman, the average people that don't know all those jargon words, those academic words. Sometimes I include them as like signposts. So as I've often said to people, don't be afraid of big words. It doesn't mean you're dumb if you don't know what a word means. That's a perception, that's a guilt that's been given to you by the system because that's part of a hierarchical mindset. You think you are stuck in this perception where you think that you're just little you who doesn't understand the big words that the man on the podium is saying down to you from up in the hierarchy. Yeah, it takes you back to a mindset that is given to you in school education, where the teacher at the class condescendingly just projects stuff into your brain and you're supposed to just accept it. Yeah. So when people get upset by big words that they don't know, so don't be upset with yourself if you don't know a word. Learn that word, expand your own lexicon, which will expand your thinking. Your thinking is limited mostly to the words that you know. You define your reality with the words that you know. A lot of people, it's not the majority. The majority of people are stuck in textual thinking. In other words, they use words in their thinking. Yeah, as in you have like that, what I refer to as the monologue of consciousness. You know, it's almost like the scrolling marquee going across the inside of your brain of like, I'm thinking of saying this word next, and then I'll use that word, and then I'm going to think about it. That's what's going through most people's thinking. Yeah, that's the average person's modality of thought. Whereas if you can get out of that restriction of language, the construction of language, and you use symbolism and imagery, which is more what people refer to as right brain thinking, yeah, rather than left brain. The system is very left brain dominated. But if you can step back into that right brain realm, you can get a view of reality, you can get a perception on what's going on around you that gives you a different angle. So you get a more holistic picture. You're not imbalanced to one side or the other. You know, you're expanding yourself into a balanced perspective by making use of that symbolic language. So in the long run, what I had been doing for the past couple of years is I would put a title on the show, the particular episode that I was doing, where I deliberately play with the English language. I'll use analogies and metaphors. I'll use mashed up words. You know, I'll put words together, or I'll use words because of their double meaning. Because the English language has a lot of words that have multiple meanings. They don't have a singular defined meaning. Yeah? That was my way of hopefully showing to people, like, look, you know, don't restrict yourself to that kind of linear, progressive thinking. It's a useful style of thinking for doing things that are empirical. In other words, scientific experimentation, calculus, logical reasoning can be put into that kind of linear thinking. But expand a little, flex your muscles a little. Yeah, make use of that artistic side of your thinking ability, which allows you to take things such as the definition of a word and apply different meanings from that word, dependent on the context, the intonation, the references that it's making. So that's how you get to metaphors and analogies. Yeah, it's something that I found because of the way this environment works, it often replicates the way the system works, as in there is a face on the screen who dictates the truth to you. So it's an authority figure that spoon feeds the listener. Yeah. And I know that's not true for everything. That's not true for everyone in this environment, but it's a majority. It's a commonality. And what I was hoping to achieve was like, no, look, I'm just somebody that's similar to yourself, who's encountering this stuff and having the experience of looking at this stuff, this information, and being part of the world and blah, blah, blah. And I can see a different perspective on it that you might find useful or helpful. It might help you grow a little. And if we're going to get towards the kind of situation that I would like to see, then from my own reasoning and observation of the way things are playing out at the moment, that's what we need to be going towards. Yeah? People need to be able to think for themselves. I've often referred to it before as a nation state is a state of mind. I did one episode called A Nation State of Mind to try and stress this point for people. Yeah? The current system we have is based on a principle of order followers. People who are subordinate to an authority above them, a hierarchical structure. That enables singular individuals to command armies of other people, because that army is made up of people who just follow orders. They don't think for themselves. They are just the factory workers that are generated by the Prussian school system style education. Whereas that's a major part of the foundational problems that create all the other problems that we're often talking about in daily life, because that kind of structure is open to abuse in the worst kind of ways, because all that needs to happen is one bad apple to get into that position of authority, and they can create immense misery and suffering. Yeah, you think of the classic, the dictators and whatever, you know, Tony Blair, people like that. You know, a singular person can cause immense suffering for masses of people. Whereas if you have a country that's full of people who can all intellectually, cognitively, spiritually stand on their own feet. In other words, they can think for themselves, they can analyze problems and arguments, they can think a little outside the box, they can be creative and innovative, then you don't need this authority figure. You don't need the arbiter of truth who's handing out instructions to an army of subordinates. Yeah, that is the, you know, this is why I say I'm a philosophical anarchist. And a lot of the stuff I'll often talk about on the show is geared around those kind of principles. I would prefer the kind of world I am working towards is a world that is primarily anarchistic in its political situation. At the most, or at the least, I should say, I would want to see the most minimal government possible, the smallest number of positions of authority that could be potentially open to abuse of the many others. So you reduce the size of the government, there's less positions of authority that can be abused by bad people to cause suffering on the masses. So to me, so I'm working towards, it may be a utopian, idealistic idea, you know, the idea of an anarchistic global world, but we head that direction and guaranteed you will reduce the size of government. You will get more decentralization. You'll get more individuals and small groups of people who figure stuff out for themselves, stand on their own 2 feet and self-help. Yeah, they organize themselves to help themselves and each other around them. You end up with more community-based support groups and enactment of things that you'd like to see happen in your world. Yeah. So to me, it was all about, I use language, I use metaphor and analogy, I try and focus around philosophical ideas, and I try to present them to people in such a way that it gives you a different perspective on some of the stuff that's going on, and hopefully it will help reveal the hidden mechanisms of this big system, because it's very good at disguising itself, and part of that disguise is limiting your thinking. So a lot of what I do is I prod people's thinking. I say, hey, I bet you know, stretch your muscles a bit, stretch your brain muscle a bit. It's a long explanation. Hopefully it makes sense of why I do things the way I do.
A great explanation, mate. I just wanted to just check in, you know, so everyone knows that I'm still. I know you're yeah, I'm still here. There were a couple of things that I want to ask you. There's a specific question that I want to ask you, but I just wanted to have a look in the chat room to everybody and say hello to everyone who's in the chat room. All the followers, also known as wankers. That's Patrick Nee. I think we'd all agree with that one. Super Leeds, you can beat an egg, but you can't beat a wank. Okay, thanks for that, Super Leeds. Good old Leeds. There's nothing.
You can make scrambled eggs at the same time. Just a touch of whisk. You know, what you do.
Well, yeah.
Have the bowl in your lap.
Yeah. So also, I wanted to, because you mentioned right early back in that you mentioned Twitter and you were talking about accounts and constant arguing. I completely agree with you. And some maybe bots. Now, I just wanted to just say that bots don't bother me as much as they used to now that I'm part robot. So I was I'm probably a little bit biased. When we were talking at the beginning, before we came on air, we made mention of this, and we I think it was something that we both completely agreed on. But I'm talking about how do we get how do we get a society that has been kept in a state of perpetual adolescence, an immaturity. How do we counter that? I know there's shows like yours and the shows like ours, and whatever you think of our show, we try to just be honest and be good, and we try to think about the things that we're saying, and we're also able to say that we were wrong about certain things. When you're wrong about something, you can say, well, I was wrong about that, and you can change your mind. This is the sort of thing that your show and our show, I hope, that does here, just to get people thinking. But how do we, when you can't, if you say to an average person, you've been kept in a state of adolescence, and what you really need to do is you really need to grow up. That's what you need to do. You need to grow up, and then once you've grown up, you will you'll see things differently. You'll view the world differently. You'll not be the same person, but because you're not supposed to be the same when you're an adult as you were when you were a kid.
Yeah.
So how do we get out of that?
Slowly catchy monkey. I'm saying that a little bit jokingly, but I think that is a big part of the way to approach it. I don't do it as much anymore because I don't tend to get into that many conversations anymore where I'm trying to sort of point people in a certain direction for their own argument, if that makes sense. Basically, Socratic method. If you utilize Socratic method, because when you're a child or when you learn through experimentation, exploration, and experience. Yeah, so you try doing something and you see what happens.
I don't know if it's me or if it's you, but you're
still there.
I'm just saying, break it up a bit. I don't know whether it's you.
Hang on, I've already turned my bandwidth right down. See how it goes, and it might recover. It might just be a bit spiky.
There we go.
There could be.
There we go. Start again.
Yeah, Socratic method. And I say Socratic method because it's similar to the way we learn in the first place anyway.
I'm just having a look back to see whether it's you or me. It's probably me, I think. It seems to be me. It's me that's having problems, I think. It's my internet. Hopefully, like we say, it'll come back. Are you still there, Cookie?
I'm still here, yes, mate. Try lowering your bandwidth. I'm still here.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Are you there?
Can you hear me now, sir? I'm still here.
Oh, we've been hit by gremlins. I think I can hear. I can hear you coming in and out. I don't know whether it's me, whether it's you. I don't know, but we seem to be losing point. I don't think it shouldn't be me. I've got a decent enough connection. Are you there now?
Am I still here? I'm still here as far as I can see.
Can you hear me now?
My screen's not changed, so I can still hear you.
You can hear you. You can hear me.
Yeah, I've been able to hear you, no problem. I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can still type in the chat. So I don't think it's me. I think it's you.
Right, I think it might just be me. I don't know whether we've got it back. How's that? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine, right?
Right, okay. That's it. It's obviously me that's done it. I'm sorry about that. The point you was making, I can't remember now. We were talking about
how do you bring people out of adolescence? I was trying to say Socratic method, because it's similar to how we learn anyway, in particular when we're children. We learn through exploration, experimentation, and experience. So we try doing something and we see what happens when we try doing it. Yeah. The risk in that is if you in an isolated situation as a child, then you're potentially going to try doing something that will be harmful to yourself because you don't know any better because you're new to this world experience. Yeah. So the adults around you normally will say to you, don't touch that. You know, don't touch the cooker because you'll burn yourself. You know, all that kind of instructional help in your learning process. So the reason I say Socratic method is because I've found it the most successful way to help people see the problems within their own arguments or their own body of knowledge without just trying to batter them on the head to convince them on a subject, yeah, which is how the system does it. The system basically uses a stick and say, you must repeat the same as me. They don't explain to you why you need to learn this, why it's beneficial to you or anything like that. No, they just go, you must repeat the same as me. Socratic method is a way to help people realize their own mistakes, if there are mistakes in their argument, yeah? So you use the questioning of their own argument. You ask them, well, what do you mean by utilizing that word? Are you sure you're referencing the correct body of information for that claim? You know, there's various ways you can do it, and you have to do it somewhat on the fly. It's not like something you can pre-prepare for because you need to hear the other person's argument and then work your way through it. But utilizing that kind of method is sort of like, that's why I said slowly catch your monkey. Because I've found, and I think there's a lot of good body of work to back this up. Children require a certain amount of boundaries where you have to say, no, don't do that, because otherwise they would hurt themselves. They could severely, you know, potentially kill themselves. So at some point you have to give them boundaries. Some of those boundaries include psychological things that we do with each other within life. Yeah. I'm not saying all of that is right or good. Some of it is bad and actually unhelpful and unhealthy, but it's still part of the reality that as we're growing up and learning, you need boundaries, which include psychological boundaries. But that process of learning works best when done with honey, not with vinegar. So if you beat a child into acceptance, if you say, you know, don't talk about that kind of stuff or I'll batter you, you know, I'll smack you until you stop saying it. That's using negative, well, it's using positive, but abusive reinforcement to force them to just repeat what you're demanding of them. Whereas children learn best if you help them realize why something is good for them or bad for them. So if you help them realize why it would be hurtful to them if they touch the cooker, yeah. So you don't make them injure themselves, but you go through the process, which can be, you know, it can be frustrating and require a lot of patience because, you know, kids classically sometimes get stuck in that loop of why. It's a brilliant psychological loop, man. It's just like, why? It's like, give me more info. That's what they're asking you for. Yeah, they're like an open sponge at that stage for more information. But my main point being is, you learn best when it's done through encouragement and positive reinforcement that you're going in the right direction, kind of thing. Yeah, if you just simply bully somebody into accepting what you're trying to say to them, then you know better than the system. That's the way I view it. I would be no better than the system if I try and do that.
Well, but as a little aside, just when you were saying that about kids saying why, when I first met my wife, she's got a son, so he's my stepson, Connor, and the most irritating little kid you'll ever come across. Honestly, he was all irritating and unrelenting, and he once says to me, he was the one that kept saying why. Every time he asked you something, and you'd give him an answer, and he'd go why, and you go why. And anyway, this one time I said to him, I said, "You say why again, and you're going to bed." And he went, "How come?"
It's a clever kid. It's a clever kid.
Fucking clever for my liking, yeah. Far
See,
too clever for my liking.
that shows that he was able to explore the use of his own language, the language he has available to him. Yeah, that's classic trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric. Grammar is the basis, the toolbox that you use to express ideas. Yeah, this is one of those things that helps people come out of adolescence. You're speaking about that kind of stuff originally. Yeah, how do you help people get out of that adolescent mindset? One of the things you can help them with is tell them about the trivium, because that empowers their own thinking ability. That will help them improve their own thinking ability. And in doing so, they take a step up out of that subordinate psychology where they see the government or the state system as a pseudo parent, because that's why most of the population is stuck in that adolescence. Yeah, that's why they're stuck as kidults, as they call it. Yeah, you're not exactly an adult, you're still somewhat of a child, you're a kidult. But that process of, you take the foundational toolbox to put words together to be able to express them to somebody else, which is your grammar, and you apply logic, so you utilize your reasoning to construct an argument, and your rhetoric is how you actually put the words together in such a way that it sounds good and gets the idea across in the way that you want. And that shows that for him, when you told him he weren't allowed to use the word why anymore, he thought about it and he thought, well, I can use other words to basically ask the same thing. There you go. How come? That's his brain working. Yeah, that's a fucking good sign, right? But doing that kind of
good.
Doing that kind of Socratic method is a way to, like I said earlier, help people see the flaws in their own thinking. And in doing so, you can hopefully help them progress towards improving their own thinking so they don't trip over the same mistakes again and again and again. Like I was talking about earlier, some of the things I saw in this environment, the patterns that occur, are common mistakes that people trip over or get stuck on again and again and again. And a lot of them can be fairly easily dealt with or remedied. So utilizing something like Socratic method, helping people, when they say to you, like, well, one of the classic arguments that's a good sort of standby point to use to explain this kind of stuff to people is one that gets thrown often when you're talking about anarchism. And people say that the classic argument, well, who will build the roads? And you start Socratic method on that question, that reason, and you say, well, who do you think builds the roads now? How are the roads actually built? Where does the funding come from to pay for those roads to be built? So the funding is coming out of your energy, out of your own productive value that you're adding into the society you live in. So therefore, think again about your question. You built the roads, didn't you? So you're asking who's going to build the roads? The same people who were doing it in the first place. It's just that now the payment method will come from a different direction. It won't be required to be authorized by some bureaucrat in an office somewhere who stamps a bit of paper to say, yes, we want that road built there. Yeah. That's Socratic method, to bring somebody from, and I'm not saying this to be derogatory to anyone, but to bring somebody from an infantile concept of an argument to a more holistic and adult perception of the reality of what they're actually asking about, the question that is really what they're trying to ask. Yeah, they ask who will build the roads. Really what they're asking is who will take care of the world. You mean I've got to do it? Yeah. That's what they're asking, which is a child saying to an adult, who's going to make my dinner? Do you think I have to do it? Have I got to make my dinner? Yeah, when you become an adult, you have to make your own dinner. Yeah, so that's that process of the mass of the people stuck in an adolescent mindset where it's like, well, I don't want to do it, so I defer to this authority structure that says they'll sort it out for me. Yeah, I don't want to have the hassle of having to organise or be involved in that, so I defer to this external authority and allow them to do it, which is the same mindset when you're a child.
that they will then themselves say, as part of that, I'm willing to accept certain things that I don't wish to happen, that perhaps I don't want to happen, and many people don't want to happen, such as the Iraq War. I mean, there were 1 million people marched against the Iraq War. It still happened.
Yeah.
So you know, but if you're invested in that system, if you're in that system, then and you're supporting that system, then you have to accept the things that you don't like along with the things that you do. And people will say, well, that's just democracy, but it isn't, is it? Because the democratic vote, really, the democratic opinion was we didn't go to war in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
But we did.
Yep. Because those in authority, in those small positions that command over many others, said, yes, we're going. 45 minutes, they could come and they could bomb us in 45 minutes, so we're going to war. All that bullshit. So I always end up ranting about Tony Blair whenever he comes into the conversation in some way. So it's Tony Blair. But yeah, you're right. It is.
Complete and utter fucking useless wanker. Right, we've got a few minutes left. I just want to just pick your brains and get your opinions on the psychology and the weapons that are being used against people that are on the far left. You know, like Antifa, stuff like that.
Yeah.
What sort of mindset do those people have to be in?
Ooh, the SJW mindset. That's become somewhat of a cookie cutter mold, to put it one way. This is coming out of the academia more than anything. Academia, the intelligentsia, you could also define it as. I prefer to define it as the intelligentsia, because it's not just the younger people who are the students. It's a mindset that is being reinforced by a lot of the people who work in academia. So the professors, the secretaries who work in the universities and whatever, they're all perpetuating the problem. But it does come back to the change of paradigm that we're going through, where the new system wants to be installed or set up in such a way that it cannot be dethroned. This statist structure that we have at the moment that has now become a global unification, a one world system, a one world order structured under the UN, supposedly still loosely, but it provides the codifying structure that brings together a singular world system. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That they want to take us, they want to transition us into a new world structure that basically means that there is no chance of you voting them out. Yeah, we're transitioning from a structure that had the sham, the facade of what they tell us is democracy, which is it's a ridiculous joke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Classic cliched phrase of two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. That's the democracy that we have. Yeah, that's the way they play it out. That is being slowly converted into a corporatist infrastructure. Basically, they're revealing the genuine running of the system, which is a corporatist system. They're revealing that operation. Yeah. So now the facade of democracy is slowly being removed. You see the reality of this in the way that most of the world is dominated by the mega corporations. Those mega corporations now have enough wealth and resources available to them that they can create entire towns that are all branded with their brand name. Apple builds entire communities in China just to make the products that we then buy. Well, I say we, I've never bought any of their shit, but that's the way the situation is going. So the governorship, if I can say it, of the current democratic political system is going to become less and less capable of actually operating the countries that they're running. This is deliberate. Yeah, it's a slow degradation of the current status quo. It's a deliberate, slow crash. In doing so, the public will demand solutions to the absence of the services that were provided originally by their governmental systems. So they'll start employing more private third-party companies to do stuff for them. Like what's been happening here in the UK, where communities now are clubbing together and paying for private security to patrol their neighbourhoods because the police are no longer there doing a good enough job. So they're turning to private security firms. In a way, we have already had similar done to us in some of the other services here in the UK. Like the NHS is slowly transitioning into a private healthcare system. The bins, the rubbish processing system is slowly becoming all privatised again. I know a lot of this is what the Tories do. They privatise everything, and then Labour get in and they nationalise everything again. But over the last couple of decades, that pattern has changed such that now it's more, they both go in the same direction towards corporate involvement in the infrastructure and bureaucracy of your society. So companies like Serco and G4S are the people who are really running your society. Yeah, they're private corporations that are owned by private individuals. That is, I'm brain farted.
It's scary.
That is perfect timing to brain fart. What was your original question again?
Well, I don't know. I can't remember that far back for chuffing out. I think it was about. Look, anyway, you mentioned coppers.
Democracy scam.
Democracy and it's a nonsense, isn't it? But you mentioned coppers earlier on, and I just wanted to bring this up. You probably couldn't get. There are probably people that are spending their own money on private security firms because they've got no faith in the police, and yet the police are concentrating on things like arresting people who misgender somebody, or in fact they don't even misgender them. They give them the correct fucking gender, and they get arrested for it and held for hours. I mean, what? It's nuts. Can we get off or what? Is there any way I can get off here?
No. It's the simple answer. I've been arguing this for a number of years now. It's like we do need people to go and set up little communities and make themselves a way of living that does not rely on the system at all. We need that to happen. It's like building lifeboats. Yeah, we need people to be doing that kind of thing. If they're so inclined and they want to do it, great, fantastic, thank you, go and do it. But it's not the solution, because this thing, this structure, this mindset is not going to go away just because you ignore it, just because you run to the hills and say, oh, I'm not dealing with it, I don't want to know it, I'm ignoring it. No, it can do its own thing and I'm going to stay here and do my thing. It will never go away. And this system, because it's parasitic, requires everything to be under its control, everything including you. So if you go and live in your own secluded community somewhere, eventually this thing will come and knock on your door and be demanding of you in some way. So there is no getting away from it. Yeah, I think that is a deliberate misdirection that they give people to make them think they can solve the problems by just running off to the hills. That won't solve the situation. This thing needs to be addressed. It needs to be dealt with. So my attitude to it is I try to have one foot in either world. I've got one foot in a world where I'm trying to work towards being as independent of the system as I can be, but at the same time, I'm not ignoring it and I'm interacting with it whenever I need to or feel that I have to or require to for whatever reason, yeah? And that includes being able to still interact with everybody else. Because another part of that mindset of them wanting to, persuade you that run away, that's the answer, is they're separating you from everybody else. Think of it as like a salesman who's convinced most of the crowd that his product is really good and they want to buy it, but there's just one or two people who are like, nah, mate, I think your product's shit, it causes diseases. So he gets his mates to take those people outside of the fence, so the crowd can no longer hear them. So now he's got a captive audience where everybody's going to buy his shit. The system wants us to do that. The system wants us to run to the hills and hide and ignore it, because then it will have dominance to indoctrinate and train an entire body of people to just accept what the fuck it's doing. Yeah, I think I know. You asked about the SJW mindset. That was what it got me started on it originally. What kind of mindset are they in? You were asking me. It is a very infantile mindset, because it relies on the infrastructure of governance that the state system is, the establishment system is, yeah? So it absolutely relies on that hierarchical structure. These, in the worst elements, I'm describing the worst elements of this kind of stuff, yeah? So again, people get upset that they think you're targeting them and saying they're bad people and whatever. The worst elements of it is that the people who succumb to that kind of mindset are completely wards of the state, because all they're doing is acting as minions to protect the state, because they're demanding that it gets bigger and it has control over everything, so that it can provide for them and protect them and care for them and all that kind of shit, which on the surface sounds nice and good, but in the long run leads to the kind of problems that we see. Yeah? The big brother state, the big nanny state, the constant surveillance, the constant control of everything, all your interactions, all the information available to you, all your financial transactions, everything will be controlled and monitored by the state. That's not living. That's imprisonment.
Yeah, and of course they criminalize what is our most precious commodity, which is communication and being able to talk to each other and verbalize and speak and share ideas, even if you don't like those ideas. Why should they be outlawed? Outlawing speaking and thinking, that's basically what they're doing. Listen, Cooke, it's been awesome. Thank you very much for stepping in. I promised I'd do 3 shows this week, and now it looks like I'm gonna do that. But now it looks like I'm gonna do that. Yay!
I'm glad to help you with
society.
I helped set you up for the hat trick then.
You certainly did, mate, and it's been very interesting. Listen, everybody, go to Cookie's YouTube channel. It's Hairy Cookie Munster. You can find him on there. Subscribe, get notifications of when he's going live. Really interesting shows. If you've been remotely, if you've been anywhere near as interested in the stuff that Cookie's had to say as I have tonight, then you're in for a treat if you go and watch his shows. And he's got a back catalogue as well. Also, tomorrow night, I've got that guy on, that Mandela Effect guy, who's going to tell us all that we died in 2012. So I'm looking forward to that. But
I'm feeling better.
I'm just going to add this caveat. If the show is cancelled, then please don't blame me, because it's a bit sketchy. And last week, I know I've got it in my diary and it's all down and it should be all okay. But last week, I had to cancel because he'd booked to go bowling with his workmates. So it clashed with that. So that's the reason why it didn't happen last week. And it's going to happen this week. It's going to happen tomorrow, as far as I'm concerned. I'm in contact with him.
No, Joe, so it's already happened. You just forgot. It's a Mandela Effect, man.
If you want to check him out, anyway, it's SMQ_AI. SMQ_AI, and we all died in 2012. Apparently, we're going to get into it tomorrow night. It's an extra show that I owe you, because I had one off a couple of weeks ago. So listen, thank you very much for your support as usual. All the people in the chat room, you've been absolutely fantastic. It's always good ordered in the chat room as well. There's never any troublemakers, apart from Dinny, obviously. But you know, there's never any real proper troublemakers in our chat room, and it's all good natured, and it's a bit of a community that we've got set up here at Raconteurs News. So big thank you to my guest this evening, Hairy Cookie Munster, and we will see you I'll see you tomorrow night, and Webby hopefully be back next week. But Pippa King booked in on one of the days next week. I don't know whether it's the Monday or the Tuesday. With it being half term, she's able to come on the show. So Pippa King is going to be on Monday or Tuesday. In fact, let me just have a quick look in my diary. I've got a diary, look. Who can push you all? You've got a diary. Here we go. Oh, that's today's. Bear with me. Oh, there we go. That's on Tuesday next week, the 19th. Pippa King will be our guest. I'm going to get somebody booked as well for Monday. It's going to be. We're getting back to normal. We're getting back to doing the show. So thanks very much to Eric Cookie Monster. Thanks to you for listening. Hope to see you back soon, Webby. And thanks to everyone in the chat room. We'll see you next week. Tomorrow. Tomorrow a bit. Bye.